Hey guys, Mark Kwok here. Today we're talking insanity, and by that I mean this guy, the Rolex Daytona. So this is a highly requested video because some of you guys have seen this on my wrist, and this is all the talk of the town in the watch world if you have been following the watch world at all recently. Some of you guys may know that I already own another Rolex Submariner, which in and of itself is a pretty luxurious purchase, a lot of money, and some people will find me crazy for purchasing it. But that was a purchase from a long time ago, 8 years ago, something like that. One of my major big purchases that I've ever had. But this watch here, this watch became my second watch, kind of as part of a two-part collection. And that only happened a couple years ago, 2019. But the truth is, there's kind of a story behind this watch, my purchasing of it, how long I waited for it, etc., etc. So let me get into that right now. This is the reference 116520 Rolex Daytona. It is a modern Daytona, but not the very most modern one. It has been replaced now in 2016, I think, with the 116500, which is basically the same watch, but it has a ceramic bezel as opposed to the steel bezel that this one has. So let's talk about this watch a bit, the hype surrounding it, and then my pros and cons, and pretty much anything that you guys have asked me about this watch. So start off with story time. I got this watch 2 years ago. And if you know anything about Rolex Daytonas, you know that this is a very rare watch. You can't just go into the store and buy this watch. To get the most recent iteration of this watch, you probably have to wait 5 to 10 years, which honestly, they might not even put your name on the list. They pretend to put your name on the list. However, I actually wanted this watch almost 10 years ago. Even though I bought it just 2 years ago, I wanted it 10 years ago. So let me give the story. When I was getting out of college, I knew that one of my biggest purchases, my first purchases that was meaningful, was going to be a watch. At the time, I really only knew two brands, and that was Rolex and Omega. And it was going to be some watch between those two. And I had narrowed it down based on the entire catalog of Rolex and of Omega. It came down to 4 watches as my first main watch that I wanted to be proud of and wear of, and maybe even like pass on to my son one day sort of scenario. The Omega Seamaster Professional, the same one kind of James Bond wore, and there was a Planet Ocean version of it as well, so one of those. The Omega Speedmaster Professional, the one that went to the moon. The Rolex Submariner, which, you know, is kind of the iconic one, the one that I already have here. And then the Rolex Daytona, which is this bad boy here. Came down to those 4 watches because just design-wise, I knew I wanted a steel watch. I knew I wanted something timeless. I knew I wanted something that either was a chronograph or a diver. Like, it had come to one of those 2 designs. I also knew that I wanted to buy it used just to be able to get a better price on it because all of these watches are so insanely expensive. And at the time, I wasn't making any money. At the time, the Seamaster and Speedmaster were in kind of like that $2,000 range, which is really expensive for a watch, let's be real, but that's kind of, I knew the price I had to pay. Then there was the Rolex Submariner at around like $4,000, so double that price, but at least I get kind of the Rolex name. And then there was the Rolex Daytona, the one I actually wanted the most, the one I think had the best design, had the Rolex name, was like kind of everything I wanted in a watch. That was almost $9,000. So immediately, as much as I wanted the Rolex Daytona, I actually thought about it because I was like, this thing is beautiful. This thing is like something I really, really, really want. But $9,000 on a watch, are you kidding me? Like, that sounds ridiculous. And especially as a college kid, like $9,000, you don't spend $9,000 on anything, okay? Even a car you don't spend $9,000 on. And so I just gave it up. It was over. Rolex Daytona out of here. And I went with an Omega to start. The problem is this. After that moment, I don't know. The Rolex Daytona was just constantly in my mind. It was like, not that I was like obsessing over it or anything, but I knew that I wanted to get a Daytona one day. And I was just hoping when I get enough money, I could spend, regrettably, that $9,000 and get the Rolex Daytona. Problem is this. Every single year, I would at least check up a couple times. Just, hey, what's the price of the Rolex Daytona? How do I get one? What I didn't know is that it would basically become the most in-demand watch that Rolex sells. And not only that, but it became like an icon. And then the new version of this guy came out, and then it was over basically at that point. Like, no one could get a Daytona. Everyone wanted that watch. It was like the most popular, it was like crack. But one day, 2 years ago, I don't know, I knew, like, if there's something that I've been thinking about for like 10 years, like, All right, you know what? Let me just get it. Like, I know it's gonna cost me an arm and a leg, but good news about this is that if times became tough, I could sell it again too, because you just saw the price rising and the demand just getting worse and worse and worse. And so 2019, I pulled the trigger. It was a really good deal. I'll tell you a little bit later how much I got it for, but it wasn't cheap. So let's go first into the pros and cons of this watch. Why do I like this watch? What is so great about it? Design. I think it's a beautiful watch. In terms of the size, it's perfect, 40 millimeters. The case is, I think, a better looking case than the Submariner or GMT or any of the other Rolexes that are out there. It has curves in the right spots. It has just enough interesting parts to it, like the fact that it has these screw down buttons here, it has 3 sub dials inside. It has kind of like markers on the bezel. Like, I think it just makes it complicated enough that there's a lot to look at and it's interesting, but not overly complex that it's like busy to read or anything like that. It looks amazing on the wrist of so many people. Some people like the fact that it has kind of these polished aspects to it, so it kind of raises or elevates the luxuriousness of it and the dressiness of it. So it ends up occupying this perfect spot where it's pretty dressy, actually, for a steel watch, and also obviously a sports watch at the same time. Second, it's durable. I mean, I talked about how durable the Submariner is. Like, that is a very durable watch. You can tell it's a chunky case. Like, this one I would say is not quite that level, but if you're talking about like dress watches and like comparing it to all the swath of watches out there, it is actually quite a hefty and nice and durable watch. As much as this is a valuable asset, I do make sure to wear my watches, and so you'll notice there are scratches and stuff all over this thing, dents and bruises. The other thing I love about this watch is it's very reliable, and everything that needs to work on this watch works well. Whether it's the chronograph and you press those buttons, it goes in with a nice click, and the chronograph moves perfectly. Whether it's the power reserve and the fact that it lasts really 70 plus hours, no problem, and you let this go for a couple days, and the accuracy, I mean, this has been one of my most accurate watches I've ever dealt with. It's truly a fantastic watch, and it gives you kind of everything you need in a watch. Also, I can't lie, the hype and the respect that this watch kind of gets, it adds to your own appreciation of it. I mean, it makes you proud to wear it, right? Like, you know that this watch you have is like in desire by many. And another reason I really like this is that it is a pretty tried and true design from way back. It has history, it has sort of this story behind it. Paul Newman wore it. I don't know, it's just like there's heritage and story behind this watch, and so you get an emotional tug from that. When you buy a Michael Kors watch from, you know, Nordstrom somewhere and that's kind of it, like, there's not gonna be like this emotional story, heritage, stuff like that. This watch actually has that in droves, and it doesn't necessarily make the watch any better per se when you wear it, but it's an emotional thing, right? And when it's an emotional thing, those stories, that heritage, that history, it kind of means something. Let's talk about the cons, and of course, the number one con, the elephant in the room, is the price and availability. And those two things are inextricably tied to each other. The Daytona is sold in low supply. It's probably their most kind of like flagship. They know it's the most popular, so they reduce the supply of it. That leads humankind to say, hey, I can't get that. Why can't I get that? And then like wants it even more. And thus, we are in this situation where if you want a Daytona now, you can't buy it. You can buy it used, but then you're gonna have to pay so much. I told you 10 years ago that I could have paid used $9,000 for this watch. I bought this watch for $6,000 more than that. 15. Yeah, I know, it sounds dirty, and I'm sorry for anyone who thinks it's absolutely insane that I spent $15,000 on a watch, but I did. I shudder at like telling YouTube that I spent this much on this watch, $15,000. But I swear there was a reason. At the time when I bought this, the average going rate for this watch was about $17,000. I found one about $15,000. I was like, oh my God, it's a discount. This guy seems trustworthy. It's a used one. Let me go ahead and get this. And it was in great condition, so I bought it, box, papers, so on. I knew that I would not lose much money if I needed to sell this thing or what have you. I just wanted to own it. And then if it wasn't the right fit or I felt like so uncomfortable with the fact that I had this $15,000 thing, I was going to sell it. Crazy thing is, in the last 2 years, I don't know what COVID has done to the economy of watches, but something happened. This watch is on sale in like various forums used for over like 27,000 US dollars. So now, I'm not lying here. If you wanna go, check this out. If you wanna buy this watch right now, and in good condition, obviously, with box and papers, you're gonna spend $27,000 for this watch, which to me, I mean, this is only 2 years ago. But it goes to show you that, you know, I wasn't trying to be crazy here. Like I knew, at least in terms of an asset or value, like this thing was gonna keep its value. But one thing that's really nice is that I can still make my money and above that if I wanted to sell it. But that being said, I still believe this price and availability is absolutely a con. Like I said, to get this watch, you need to spend $26,000. If you wanna get the new version of it, you gotta spend well over $30,000. And that's when the MSRP is still like $13,000. Making this video right now makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I'm basically telling you guys this is a fantastic watch, I love it, you know, so on, but you can't get it. And if you want to get it, you got to pay a substantial premium. So it is a major con that this thing is so expensive and impossible to get. A couple other cons. I said that this has a really nice design of being kind of like this middle ground between dressy and casual because it's a steel watch, but it has these polished center links, it has a polished bezel, all this sort of stuff. These polished parts get scratched so wildly that if you're a scratch, you know, you get OCD about scratches, you're gonna go crazy. Now, would I recommend you go out and get the Rolex Daytona? This one's hard. If you've been thinking about it for decades, like me, like you have wanted this as your holy grail watch, I would say then just keep your eyes glued to kind of like a good deal. And by a good deal, I mean like whatever the market price is, like see if you can find something a little less than market price. That way you can, I don't know, recoup your money in the case that in the future you're gonna sell it. Because even at those high prices, I mean, there's nothing that's going to quench that thirst like the real thing. But for the rest of you, maybe you're just seeing the hype. Maybe you think it's a cool watch, cool Rolex. I don't know if it's a good idea to go ahead and splurge this much on this item, especially when you know that you're paying 3-4 times retail price. Quench his thirst somewhere else. There are other really popular, nice models, especially Rolex, that you might not spend that much more than retail. Maybe a Submariner, maybe, I don't know, like an Explorer. The watch market right now is I do believe, in a bubble. And there are some watches, maybe 4 or 5 really big watches, Audemars Piguet, Royal Oaks, and you know, Patek Nautiluses, and this is one of them. And this might be the #1 out of all of them. Like, people want this watch more than any other watch, the new version especially. It may actually dip in value when the hype has started to die down for a bit and something else becomes the new hottest thing. There's my quote-unquote review or thoughts about the Rolex Daytona. It's insane. The hype and the market around it is insane, but truly, I do think it's a fantastic watch and one that I hopefully will keep for the rest of my life. But I did want to give you guys some of my thoughts and the story behind how I got this watch. And yeah, it is truly one of my favorite things. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Mark Kwok. I'll see you guys on the next one.